This is Mayor Reinette, former mayor of, what did I lose her name? Here it is. Reinette Senum, she's the former mayor. She resigned. She got reelected and then she resigned after that because of all the flack that was going on about masks and shutdowns and the coronavirus. She actually resigned as mayor of Nevada City, California. Yeah, so let's see her story real quick.
Hello, everyone. My name is Reinette Senum, and I'm coming to you from a tiny little town in Northern California called Nevada City. And first of all, I would like to be able to thank the organizers of Breaking the Chains of Tyranny for this opportunity to speak to all of you today, as well as your host, Sheriff Mack. I don't need to tell you that we're living in unprecedented times. I'm sure that you've heard those words quite a few times today. What I'd like to do is just share with you some of my insider information, the experiences that I've had as now a former city council member and also former mayor of Nevada City. I had just completed my second term as a council member as well as a mayor, and I was up for my third term when I resigned about 6 weeks ago in July. I would like to just digress here and kind of give you a little bit of the timeline of what happened here in Northern California. Myself, I began to become aware of the coronavirus in Wuhan in January. And it was the first time ever that any kind of virus like this captured my attention. SARS, MERS, H1N1 never did this. But of course, the coronavirus did. In particular, what attracted my attention was the response of the Chinese government and the crimes against humanity that were being taken place against the Chinese people in response to this virus. I saw within a matter of a few weeks that what was coming towards our shores were economic disruptions, supply chain disruptions, and possible massive political upheaval. The biggest question of all was the virility of coronavirus 19 itself. That was the defining question mark of all. We saw it come our way. I mentioned this to our county representatives, to our city council and city staff representatives, letting them know that, look, we need to stock up on supplies. We don't know what's going on. We'll need N95 masks and gloves and this and that, and be ready for possible supply interruptions. It was finally in March that as the mayor, I declared an emergency for the city of Nevada City, like our county did and our adjoining city next to us, Grass Valley. In cities and counties in California, we're doing this simply, we were told, because we had to declare an emergency and to set ourselves up for any kind of federal or state funding for this emergency. So we were ready for this type of funding. So we did this, and we did this in good faith. And at that time, day in and day out, I was watching and observing the Johns Hopkins University updates, as well as trying to find the latest medical information on what was really happening and transpiring. One of the most frightful details that I'd heard was that this virus was going to double and was doubling every 5 to 6.4 days. According to my calculation, that meant that by the end of April, the whole entire planet would be consumed with this deadly virus. Thankfully, this never manifested, and we're doing quite well, as a matter of fact. During this time, however, week in and week out, I was on these Zoom calls with our county officials, city mayors, city managers, and the director of our public health department. Now, I had to make it very clear for those of you who are not in California, interestingly enough, legislation was passed last fall in the state of California, quietly, as a matter of fact. Now we can see it clearly with hindsight. But legislation was passed that gave this unilateral decision-making power on the part of the director of the public health department. And for the most part, it went under the radar of most Californians. So at this point in time, we have our public health department doctor, Dr. Cutler, who is making these decisions to go to stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, and so on, to also invoke a mandate for stay-at-home orders, which soon followed within a matter of hours by Governor Newsom himself. At that time, I supported it because we did not know the virulence, right? We did not really know how deadly this virus was going to be. And I really did feel in my heart of all hearts is that we needed to actually be as conservative and as cautious as possible. Well, our community responded beautifully. And what we did is we stayed at home. We made sure that we didn't go out, have any kind of large gatherings, that we closed our doors, and we just played it safe for quite a few weeks. And we were told we were doing this to flatten the curve, right? To not inundate the hospitals, to make sure that we could handle this caseload. And we did. We flattened that curve and our hospitals were not inundated. Well, we slowly began to come out of our homes. And one of the most interesting things that had happened is that I was out on the streets in an outdoor cafe this one particular evening when I began to see people really coming out of their homes. And the looks in their face reminded me of something, and it took me a moment to figure out what that was. And their faces, the look in their eyes reminded me of the people that I saw after Hurricane Katrina had hit. They looked like deer in the headlights. They looked like they were in shock, like they had PTSD. And from what I could surmise, my community had undergone a type of psychological warfare for the few weeks that they had been in their homes. How could they not have? Day in, day out, 24/7, all they heard over and over and over again was be afraid, be very afraid. At the same time, a very little known fact, even to this day, is Nevada City has this amazing community volunteer radio station called KVMR. A few years ago, it built a $2.5 million state-of-the-art radio station. The day that the Governor Newsom gave his stay-at-home orders was the day that that radio station literally closed its doors to the broadcasters, locked the doors, and changed their key codes so they could not get in. From that point on as well, all we ever heard day in and day out, Monday from Friday, was Governor Newsom from 12 to 1 o'clock telling us to be afraid, be very afraid. Then it was followed up by a local news reporter telling us the same thing. All the other broadcasters, besides a few select broadcasters, were allowed to remotely do a show. Other than that, unbeknownst to the whole entire community, to this day, our broadcasters were not allowed to proceed with the regular programming. Myself and the broadcasters went to our local newspaper. We went to other outlets to tell them that what was going on, and this was never reported in the news. Our one and only alternative media source was denied us at a time when we need to hear from alternative voices now more than ever. So we began to come out of our doors, and I realized from what I could see, we'd undergone this psychological warfare where people were literally traumatized. And at this point in time, we began to reopen our restaurants and our stores and our hairdressers. And I have to say that I was quite clearly holding my breath, hoping that we could continue to do this. But then what happened was we soon found out that Governor Newsom had made a secretive deal with the Chinese government, an auto manufacturer, as a matter of fact. And this auto manufacturer was going to make millions of masks. And Newsom made this secretive billion-dollar deal with the Chinese government and would not give us the details. Well, interestingly enough, they were having a difficult time getting the OSHA safety certification. And finally, when they did get that safety certification, 5 days later, the governor made his mandate across the whole entire state of California that everyone had to wear a mask. In spite of the fact that over and over again, we could clearly see from studies, from empirical data, that masks really aren't the panacea to a virus. There's many other things that we could do to actually boost our immune system and to protect ourselves from any kind of disease. At this point in time, I knew that trouble was on our way. I began to, and continue to, I should say, ask our elected officials on these Zoom calls that we're having every single Friday. I began asking them questions. What's the end goal? What's the metrics? What are we shooting for? I would also ask questions like, what's the cost-benefit analysis to these close downs, to the economic loss, the psychological, emotional impacts, the school closures, right? This adds up to lives. And we know, as a matter of fact, that for every $10 to $25 million in economic loss, you lose one human life. People will ask, how can that be? Well, it depends. It can be because a person has lost their job, they're depressed, they're drinking, they're taking more drugs, right? Abuse, suicide. In this little tiny town of Nevada City, and in this county of Nevada County, we've had one death. And today I just heard we had a second death for the first time since March. We've had over 350 positive cases, and that is it. While this may be a pandemic, it is not a deadly pandemic. And we have tuberculosis, which is also a pandemic, but we have never ever closed our whole entire economy and shuttered businesses and schools and churches and sent everyone home. So I continue to ask our representatives these particular questions. And every time I begin to ask one or two of these questions, I would be muted on our Zoom calls, or I would be told to wait until the end of the call with all the elected officials and county department heads so that these county officials could address my deeper questions quietly off to the side, where I would usually get dogpiled by 1, 2, 3 different people and pretty much told that they don't have the information to give me. I know the information exists. I can see what's going on with my own eyes. I really don't need a cost-benefit analysis. I can see and I know of the suicide attempts. I've also known of the suicides committed successfully by children and teenagers. These are lost lives. And this is not the lost life of an 80-some-year-old or a 70-some-year-old who might lose 2, 5, maybe 10 years. But the particular 14-year-old girl that committed suicide last March, she's lost a good 60, 70 years, maybe 80 years on her life. Never had a real chance to fully live her adult life. And no one's keeping tabs on that. So I continued to ask these questions. I continued to get hushed. And finally, when I was ready to start my 3rd term as a city council member, I realized that I had to actually step down. And I had to step down in order to step up, which is something I never thought I would have to do, but the times were demanding it. So since then, I've been doing everything in my power to reach out to any type of platform, individual, blogger, radio show, rally, individual, anyone who wants to allow me to speak to this and also ask the deeper questions. This is what has led me to all of you today. We need you. Our representation is dead. I don't need to explain that to you. You know that. There's barely any opportunity for redress in our courts. Our court systems are also been frozen and closed down for the most part. Things have completely slowed down, from attorneys to therapists, you name it. We're all inundated by people who are calling out for help. We have therapists who are being inundated with phone calls. We have therapists who are also, at this point in time, having to oversee a lot of suicide watches, an unprecedented amount. And we have a lot of people right now who are in complete distress and they cannot reach our elected officials. Our county buildings are closed. Our city council chambers are closed. We cannot even have a face-to-face connection with our elected officials. They cannot look us in the face while they make the decisions that they make. I've been having many people telling us now and telling myself that just put your mask on, just wear it, it's just for a little while. The original stay-at-home orders were supposed to be for a little while. We are now 6 months in. And when I hear people say, just put your mask on, just put your mask on until it's over, until what is over? What are you talking about? This is not a deadly pandemic. So what is it that you are speaking to? And again, what's the overall measurable goal that we are shooting for? From what I can tell, dear men and women, it is to take away our freedoms, our inalienable rights, our freedom of redress in the courts, to speak out, to actually have true representation. And when I made that emergency declaration as a mayor, it was all in good faith that our government and our governor and our county and our city representatives had our best good in mind. And this is not the case. So now what do we do? From what I can tell, my observation, the last line of defense are the very individuals, the very people standing in the room right now, and our sheriffs. It's up to you to actually call out the malfeasance on the part of our county board of supervisors and even our city council representatives. If they are making decisions that are committing crimes against humanity, we must hold them responsible. If our sheriffs do not go to the full extent of the law and hold these individuals, our supposed representatives, constitutionally responsible, who will? No one else is going to be saving us. And our elected officials, I can tell you from firsthand experience, are not questioning the narrative. They are not asking the deeper questions. They're literally just getting their marching orders. And the way that they have done this is sneaky, a sneaky endeavor. The governor has made it such that he knows he does not have the power, the legal authority to mandate these laws. He's not have that unilateral decision-making power. And what he has done, though, is he's literally given it over to the Board of Supervisors and our county health department. They have more power than any elected or appointed position in this community. How did this happen? This happened because it was given to them last fall by our legislators. Interesting timing. So what I do is I speak out to as many people as I can, say, please assist us, help get the word out, question the narrative, and whatever you do, get to know the Constitution and what your rights truly are, and stand your ground. We have to stand our ground. I've always considered myself a very liberal, progressive individual, but I'm looking at that Constitution now more than ever before, and I realize how extraordinarily important and valuable it really is. And it is the one remaining defining line that is protecting us today. I want to thank all of you for your time and for listening and being willing to do the right thing. Thank you, everyone, and I wish you all the best of luck.